Okay, so this is the third and final recording of the muscular system, and here we're going to look at the appendicular muscles. This would include muscles of the shoulder and the upper limbs. These particular muscles will position the pectoral girdle, which is your shoulder joint. These are muscles that also move the arm, forearm, and the wrist, and muscles that move the hand and the fingers. Muscles of the pelvic girdle and lower limbs, these are muscles that will move the thigh and the leg, as well as those involved in moving the foot and the toes. So muscles that position the pectoral girdle, we have the trapezius. This is a diamond-shaped muscle. It has many actions depending on the region, and we'll look at those in a second. Your rhomboids, these are going to adduct. Remember, adduct is bringing closer to the midline of the body, and rotate the scapula laterally. The levator scapulae sounds just like what it says. It's going to elevate the scapula, and this action would be seen as sort of shrugging your shoulders. The serratus anterior, this is going to abduct and rotate the scapula. Abduction with an AB. This is moving away from the midline. And then finally, the pectoralis minor and the subclavius, these will depress and abduct the shoulder. Let's look at some of these. Here we have our trapezius, very large muscle, sort of goes to the base of the neck, at the occipital bone here, comes here, and then goes all the way down, to the lower thoracic vertebrae here. It's a triangular shaped muscle. If we remove the trapezius, we can see the levator scapulae right here. Now, whenever you look at muscles, look at the way the fibers are arranged and picture them shortening up. So if you picture these fibers shortening up, you can see it's going to sort of elevate the scapula here, and that's going to cause for shrugging of the shoulders. Here we have our rhomboids right here. Here's the serratus anterior, okay? If we look now, if we remove those, we can see our pec minor and serratus anterior here. There's the trapezius, levator scapulae, and we'll get into some of these others in a second. So let's look at these functions again. The levator scapulae, this is going to elevate the scapula, such as shrugging your shoulders. The pectoralis minor, this will depress and abduct or protract the shoulder, rotates the scapula laterally and downward, and it elevates the ribs if the scapula is stationary. The rhomboid muscle, this will adduct or retract and rotate the scapula laterally and downward. The serratus anterior, this protracts the shoulder, it abducts and immediately rotates the scapula. The subclavius, this depresses and protracts the shoulder. And the trapezius depends on the active region and state of other muscles. This could elevate, adduct, depress, or rotate the scapula, and it helps to elevate the clavicle. Muscles that move the arm. We have the deltoid. This is your major abductor of the arm. Supraspinatus will assist this, especially at the beginning of the movements. Subscapularis, teres major, infraspinatus, and teres minor. These will all be involved in rotating the arm. And these are actually part of what we refer to as your rotator cuff. The pec major, this will flex the shoulder joint. And the latissimus dorsi, this will extend the arm at the shoulder and rotation of the humerus. So your rotator cuff, as I just mentioned, this is tendons of foreign muscles will form a supportive capsule around the shoulder joint called the rotator cuff. The supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and teres minor, and subscapularis. This is a common site for all sports injuries, such as a muscle strain, tear, or break in the muscle. But again, the rotator cuff is made up of these four particular muscles. And here are the muscles that help to move the arm right here. And again, here. So if we look at these, the deltoid, this is involved in abduction at the shoulder. The latissimus dorsi will extend, adduct, and medially rotate at the shoulder. The pec major, this is flexure, adduction, and medial rotation at the shoulder. And then we have our rotator cuff muscles, the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, subscapularis, and teres minor. These are all going to be involvement of rotation of the shoulder, whether it's abduction, lateral, medial, or lateral rotation. And then teres major is adduction and medial rotation of the shoulder. Keep in mind with the rotator cuff, that means, doing a complete 360 of the arm. Muscles that move the forearm and the wrist. We have the biceps brachii. This flexes the elbow and it supinates the forearm. The triceps brachii, this will extend the elbow. The brachialis and brachioradialis, these will flex the elbow. The flexor carpi ulnaris, carpi radialis, and palmaris longus will all flex the wrist. Your extensor carpi radialis and extensor carpi ulnaris will extend the wrist. And then you have your pronators and supinators. Pronators is palm down, supinators is palm up, which will rotate at the radius. Muscles that move the hand, these are your extensors and flexors, and don't worry about the muscles getting into the hand and the fingers. There's many of them there. Again, don't worry about those. So again, muscles of the forearm, wrist, you have your flexors. Your flexors are going to be your biceps, brachialis, and brachioradialis. Your extensors, so your flexors, everybody knows flexing their arms, or flexing your muscles, right? Your extensors, this is going to be extending the arm out to where it's pretty much a straight line, 180 degrees, and that's caused by your triceps. Pronator quadratus and pronator teres, this is going to cause pronation, which is palms down. Supination is caused by the supinator, which is palms up. Okay, so let's look at the pelvis and lower limbs, muscles that work across the hip joint to move the thigh, muscles that work across the knee joint to move the leg, and then muscles that work across various joints of the foot to move the ankles, feet, and toes. So we have our gluteal muscles. These are going to cover the lateral surfaces of the iliac bones. This includes the gluteus maximus, which is the largest and most posterior. Produces extension, rotation, and abduction at the hip joint. The adductors of the thigh, this will include your adductor magnus, longus, brevis, pectineus, and gracilis. And the largest hip flexor is the iliopsoas, which is composed of the psoas and the iliacus muscles. And again, here's these muscles. You can look at these guys here. Again, I'm not too concerned with identification. It's more of the muscle and their actions. Sorry. So our biceps femoris, this is flexion at the knee. Sorry. Yeah, right here. Sorry. I don't know. Got a little ahead of myself there. We have our gluteus maximus. This is going to be extension and lateral rotation at the hip. Gluteus medius, this is abduction and medial rotation at the hip. Gluteus minimus is abduction and medial rotation at the hip. Okay, so really the maximus is different than the medius and minimus here. Your adductors, whether it's brevis, longus, magnus, pectineus, and gracilis, these are all involved in adduction and flexion at the hip joint. Your iliopsoas muscle, this is involved in flexion at the hip. And this, the iliopsoas is formed from the iliacus and the psoas major. Muscles that move the leg, there are three muscles collectively referred to as your hamstring muscles. These include the biceps femoris, the semimembranosus, and the semitendinosus. You also have the sartorius, which crosses the hip at the knee joint and it produces lateral rotation at the hip. The popliteus, which unlocks the knee joint. You then have extensors are on the anterior and lateral surfaces, collectively referred to as the quadriceps femoris. This includes the rectus femoris and the three vastus muscles. So our flexors, that are going to essentially flex at the knee. Flex at the knee is bending at the knee. Are going to include your hamstrings, which are your biceps femoris, semimembranosus, and semitendinosus. But this will also include the sartorius and popliteus. Again, these are all of your flexors of the knee. Your extensors at the knee, this will include the rectus femoris, vastus intermedialis, lateralis, and intermedius. Again, these are all of your extensors. Muscles that move the foot, we have the gastrocnemius. This is your calf muscle. It's assisted by the underlying soleus, and they share a common calcaneal tendon. You also have the fibularis and peroneus muscles, which will produce eversion and plantar flexion. And the tibialis muscle will cause inversion of the foot. Eversion of the foot is toes facing outward. Inversion of the foot is toes facing inward. And again, same thing with the hand, same thing with the toes. Muscles that move the toes, we're not going to get into those specifically, except that they originate on the surface of the tibia, fibula, or both. Tendons surrounded by synovial tendon sheaths at the ankle. You also have smaller intrinsic muscles that originate on the tarsal and metatarsal bones, and contractions will move the toes. So here's a summary of those. We have our gastrocnemius. This is going to be involved in extension or plantar flexion. Plantar flexion is on your tippy toes. At the ankle, inversion and adduction of the foot. Your fibularis brevis and longus, this is involved in eversion of the foot. Plantaris, this is plantar flexion, which is again on the tippy toes. Soleus, same thing. So the gastrocnemius, plantaris, and soleus, these are all going to, and the tibialis posterior, are all going to allow you to just sort of stand on your tippy toes. Okay, so wrapping up with the muscular system, I know this is another large and difficult chapter, and I promise you, after you get past the skeletal system and the muscular system, it does get easier. We start to get back into some more easier chapters. But when you think about the muscular system, active muscles consume oxygen, they generate CO2 and heat, which is now going to involve the respiratory system and the cardiovascular system to deal with those mechanisms. You have the integumentary system where you have dilation of blood vessels and sweating combined to increase cooling. And then you also have the combination of the nervous and endocrine systems to really regulate the muscle activity. So exercise not only is using your muscular system, but it's going to engage the cardiovascular, respiratory, integumentary, nervous, and endocrine systems as well. So you're really, when you exercise, you're really putting to work not just your muscles, but a lot of different systems here. Okay, and that is the end of chapter 7. Sorry, guys. Have a good one. See you.